What is up, everybody? It is week number 13 of NLL Weekly here tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Chris Bauer flying solo here tonight. Dan Naraki doing another job, another responsibility here tonight. So it's just me, but we've got one heck of a show for you tonight. The last three standing in the Northern Lakes League. We're going to have Dirk Conner, Tyler Swary, and Andy Brungard on to talk about their teams, where they're at, what they're excited about, all of the prep that they've been doing this week for the regional semifinals, which are coming up on Friday night, neutral sites starting this week. So really excited about all of that to talk to them here in a few moments. But before we do, want to remind you, of course, you can listen to the NL Weekly podcast on Spotify, iHeart, Apple Podcast, Pandora, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Spreaker, and Podcast Addict. All of those places to get this NLL Weekly podcast. Some housekeeping before we get into the interviews. Do want to let you know this will be our last podcast of the fall sports season. Dan and I will be back during the winter sports. We'll have basketball, both boys and girls. We'll, of course, also talk hockey and all the other different things we will see in the Northern Lakes League throughout the winter months. Excited to talk with basketball coaches on the boys and girls side. As I said, hockey coaches, all that in the Northern Lakes League. Really excited to chat with all those folks here in the coming weeks and months. So we'll take roughly like a 2-3 week break, get through Thanksgiving. And then once we come back on the other side, usually, and I'll certainly let you know, stay tuned, C Schmid01 on X. That's where you can keep track of what we're going to end up doing with the next episodes of the podcast. But again, C Schmid01, keep your eyes peeled. My guess would be we'll be back that first full week of December. Don't want to speak out of turn quite yet. So just make sure you kind of keep peeled to X, to social media. We'll make sure you know when the winter episodes of NLL Weekly will start. So excited about that. So make sure you again follow us. We appreciate all of the love and support you've shown so far throughout the 2024 high school football season. So many wonderful comments and thoughts from folks who've listened to the show. Really do appreciate all of that. I can't begin to tell you, when you do something like this, you're never quite sure how it's going to go. And the fact that we've had as much success and buy-in, tried something different, as I said this year at the beginning, by doing it in the podcast format, totally changed the way that we did it than the way that we had in previous cycles. So excited that we were able to do this. So like I said, make sure you stay tuned to X, C Schmid01. We'll talk basketball, we'll talk hockey, all that stuff. Winter sports season around the corner. Take a couple weeks off, and we'll be back after Thanksgiving. So again, thanks to everybody for the support, all that stuff. And as I said, if you don't necessarily want to listen to it, you can always watch us live. We'll tape Wednesdays at 7 right here on YouTube, NLL Weekly. And of course, the show's archived after that. Please like and subscribe to the channel. That'll certainly help us. Also, rate us, leave us comments and reviews on wherever you get your podcast. Definitely appreciate all of that. So we will go ahead and dive right in because our first guest is already here. Excited to have him on. But before we do, I want to say thank you to the folks over at Car Stereo One. Parker Lopez and his team have been great to us this year. And they specialize in providing high-quality audio system speakers and accessories for your vehicle with their wide range of products and expert advice. Remote starters, window tint, car stereo speakers and subs, bikes and boats they'll work on as well, custom interiors, vehicle wraps, even wheel packages as well. You can check them out online, carstereo1.com. Visit them 3120 Central Avenue or give them a call, 419-474-5553. And thanks to our friends over at Car Stereo One. So we thank them for all of their support, and happy to welcome on our first guest, apparently in his vehicle. He's such a busy man. He's driving from here and there, and that is the head football coach of the Perrysburg Yellow Jackets, Dirk Conner. Dirk, first off, congratulations for getting into this third round of the tournament. Never an easy feat to do, that extra round, but glad that the Jackets are still there, and congrats on that success so far.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. We're excited. We're happy to still be playing, and you know, I've said for a few weeks we feel like we've got a really good win in us, and then that's certainly what we're aiming to do on Friday night.
Well, we'll certainly talk about that game in a few moments, and having gotten a chance to watch your opponent firsthand last Friday, I'm curious to hear what you've seen from them this week. But that journey, that first game, that first week, we talked about trying to stay focused because oftentimes the way that the state playoffs are set up, you always have to try and make sure kids stay focused, stay bought in, because everybody, I think, just assumes you look at the seeding, you think, we should have an easy win. You guys took care of business that first week, and then even last week against Berea Mid Park, probably easy to have a little bit of a letdown as well with the lower seed coming in. What have you done to keep the guys focused and just kind of keep them locked in, knowing that the further we go into this, you hope they continue to stay locked in, but it's just human nature that you kind of start to get fatigued a little bit.
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, I think what we've done is we have kids that are playing football and being a part of the program matters to them. You know, we work really, really hard year round. It's not something you just sign up for and show up in August.
Mm-hmm.
And so the kids that are with us, this means something to them. And we've got a great group of seniors leading the way, and they love the process. They love the preparation. They love playing football together. And it hasn't been hard to stay focused, because we know at any time this can be over, and we want to do everything we can within our control and within our power to make sure it's not over.
When you get to this point in the year too, there's always that debate of rest versus how much, that rust debate of how much do you rest guys during the week. I think we talked about this a little bit a couple weeks ago, but what's your philosophy? What are your thoughts when you're talking about that, trying to make sure that guys have legs? It's so daunting to play, and this, having played, when you play that many weeks in a row and you don't have a break, you have some second halves off here and there, but to have legs for these guys going into Friday nights, especially as the games get tougher, there's definitely that delicate balance. What have you guys been doing to make sure that guys stay fresh but also don't maybe lose that edge?
Well, it's a lot of things, and there's no right answer to this.
Right.
20 years in, and debate on this stuff. But one thing, our approach and our attack to the weight room to keep our bodies as strong as possible, really crucial and important to us. And we've got great guys that help us in there and run that for us during the season. And so that's the first thing, is our commitment to the weight room that we have year round and 3 days a week during season, and making sure we keep our bodies strong. And it also makes us resilient and keeps us healthy. But, it's one of those things, Chris, where it's, like I said, there's no good answer.
Yeah.
I've done everything that you can do in those situations. And, when you rest kids, sometimes you don't feel like you played as good on Friday, and then you start questioning, was it because we didn't practice that way? Or, when you're practicing hard and somebody gets banged up on a Tuesday or Wednesday, then you start to question, maybe we shouldn't have went as hard as we do. And so you got to know your kids. And I will say, this time of year, you definitely cut down on the load, and we're not,
Sure.
There's not a lot of individual periods and working on the skills and fundamentals quite as much as what you do during the season. At this point, you know how to play football, and there's a lot more emphasis on skill, and you try to make your practices a little bit quicker and get off the field a little bit quicker without shorten practice, without sacrificing your preparation. And so we try to stay as much on schedule as possible, and do a little load management, maybe a little bit more rotation with guys, but it's practice as usual, and we're going to keep doing that.
Your answer kind of made me think of something, and I wonder, maybe this doesn't affect you that much. I'm just kind of curious based off of the way you answered that. Could you basically spend all day, every night, parsing and dissecting every decision? Because, as you said, there are pros and cons to everything. You probably could drive yourself mad trying to figure out what the best decision moving forward would be, I would guess.
Yeah, you definitely could. I mean, this is everything you do. It's an all-consuming job, and so it's what you're thinking about 24/7. And so, but you constantly question, and not just that. I mean, you constantly question everything and try to put yourself and your kids in the best position you can possibly put them in. And that's part of the fun too, is trying to make those decisions and trying to do what's in the best interest of the program and winning games on Friday night.
I always find this to be the most underrated part of these long playoff runs, and it has been directly born out of my experience with college football and having worked at Ohio State, but it's totally true about the state playoffs. But when you have the opportunity, and I'm sure you brought kids up, sophomores and probably some freshmen, to be on the varsity roster, how invaluable is this time of year? Because you basically have kids that I'm sure you guys have identified that you feel like can help you, maybe even this year still, but certainly in the next year, guys that you want to have as a far ahead of schedule as you possibly can. How invaluable is this extra practice time for those younger guys?
Well, it's super valuable, and those kids won't even realize how valuable it is until they're older. because they're simulating the other team right now. They're not necessarily practicing your schemes and your skills, but your best kids that are next to the ones that are going to be there are the ones that are, they're St. Ed's this week, and they were very mid-part class. Those guys, they, like I said, they don't realize it, but they're getting such invaluable experience against, good level competition and where we want them to be one day. And so, yeah, it's absolutely been worth its weight. And, it's funny you bring that up. We were talking about a few players in practice today that did a really nice job and were making plays as scout team players that they hope they carry that into the start of next season. So,
yeah, it's funny because this time of year, even if and certainly you don't hope this happens, but as you said, it's always that possibility. This could be the last week, but you hope that whatever those extra 3 weeks go, and hope it's 4, 5, and 6, but whatever that ends up being, those are weeks that several teams around the state didn't get, and certainly local teams didn't get as well. You're one of 3 teams left standing in the league, and you look at it and you think, not only is that, as you said, valuable to start identifying those guys, but even just from a confidence standpoint, some of those kids maybe start looking at themselves and maybe question, maybe I'm not where I want to be, or maybe I'm not as talented as I think I should be at this point. And then maybe you start to establish a little bit of identity this year, and you don't realize that sometimes the seeds for next year, not that you care about next year a whole lot right now, but the seeds for next year kind of start get planted at this time of year when you're late in the season like this and kind of starting to springboard into 2025 as well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, that's, when we go into our off-season stuff, which hopefully isn't for a few more weeks,
right?
Like you said, but when we go there and we start talking, who are we going to be? Who's going to be where? You're right. The guys that are doing things in practice right now are the ones who's going to get their names penciled in first, to not to fill spots. I don't like to use the expression fill spots because we're not filling spots, but to be the next guy that we're going to have to build around. So.
How is this team? I know it's only been a couple weeks, but how has this team even grown in the last 2 weeks, knowing that there has been challenges and this is a different animal? I mean, I know that the competition, you can say what you want about it, but it is still do or die. It is still taking high level preparation and understanding that every time you go out there, it could be the last time. What have you seen and what have you liked about how your team's approached it, maybe in the ways that they've grown?
Well, just, not to take the fun out of it, but just they act like we're supposed to be right now. Like there is it's not an overexcitement or we're not patting ourselves on the back. Like it's just the expectation that, we were expecting to play this week. And so we just carry on about our business. And it's, from my perspective, it's a lot of fun that way. We're not, oh yeah, it's week 13. It's, hey, we're playing St. Edward this week. Let's prepare and let's do what we feel like we need to do to give ourselves the best opportunity to win the game. So I like that part of it. And I hope as a program, we've kind of established that, because I think you've got to learn to ride that wave and to just, when it does become business-like and when it does become, hey, this is what we do, I think that's when you're really laying the groundwork for building upon further in the future. And so I've been really pleased with that, with our guys.
And you've talked about it multiple times this year. I've asked you questions, and what I love about you is you're very blunt. And you're like, no, I'm not happy with that, or no, I want more. Or, I think we should be more successful. And the kids, I'm sure to some degree, you probably have to smile a little bit and think they're starting to take on that mentality I want, because the foundation, that's a cultural thing that's going to carry on down the line as you go through, not just this year, but however long you're the head coach at Perrysburg.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what, we've been good, but, we want to move to great. And that's a big jump to make. And it's the hardest one to make. And so I that direction, but, we'll find out. Talk is cheap. We got to continue to make this the norm and start checking some really big ones off the list.
Well, let's talk about the big one this Friday. I saw this team in person last week, Lakewood St. Ed's, 7-5.
Let's switch roles here. What did you see Friday?
I'll tell you, it's funny. It's funny you ask, because the funny thing about St. Ed's, and I said this about them last week when we were going into the game, is they don't make mistakes. That's the one thing that these good teams do. And I'm sure you'd agree, good teams don't beat themselves, and St. Ed's doesn't beat themselves. That's the first thing. I would say, and in talking with Tom Lombardo last week, he had said he feels that this isn't as talented as the last 3 Division I state championship teams. And to be fair to him, I would agree they're not, but that doesn't mean that they still aren't really darn good. And that's the thing. And I think people look at that 7-5 record, Dirk, and I'm sure you'd agree with this. You look at that schedule and you go, yeah, a lot of teams would be only 7-5 based off of who they played. And I would imagine you're probably preaching to the guys like, we've got to play as perfect of a game possibly on Friday as we can at this point.
Yeah, you reach a point where you not that you never play not to lose, if that makes any sense, but you reach a point where you've got to go win it. And you can't just not lose this game against a team of this caliber. We've got to make winning plays and big plays, and that's where we've got to make a jump. Is, it's not necessarily about not making mistakes and things of that nature. We have to make plays. We have to make individual plays. We've got to make hard plays. And so, that's the jump that we're looking to make. And you said it exactly right. Like, you can't just go out there and be tentative and know that, well, this one's going to be okay. You got to be aggressive and go after it. And so that's the jump we're trying to make. That's what we're going to try to do Friday.
And I think the other part about this St. Ed's team too is when you're as battle tested as they are, they don't get phased by a lot. And that, that's where, again, as you're saying, going from that good to great, that's where they've been in those situations. And there's very little that you haven't seen. And I look at a team like your guys, and I'm not saying that you guys haven't had tough moments, but you just know that the way St. Ed's was battle tested week in and week out, there's probably a whole lot that they haven't come up against. And I would imagine just from a mental standpoint, your kids have done a good job of hanging in there, but they're going to have to make sure that for 48 minutes, because as you said, you ride that wave week to week, but you also ride it for 48 minutes every Friday of it's going to be ups and downs, and you've got to weather those peaks and valleys. You can't lose your head when something doesn't go your way.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And you hit on it. And I think I go back to, our Whitmer game. Yeah. I thought we rode the wave a little bit. I did. I thought we hit a lull at one point when things didn't go our way. And, that was a good learning moment for us. And, when I go back to what excites me is when I go back to week 10 with Anthony Wayne, we didn't execute on some things. And there were some things we'd certainly like to have back from that game. But I thought I didn't think there was any of that, things didn't quite go our way where we hit a lull kind of like we did in the second half of the Whitmer game. And so that was really encouraging to me. And really it was the point where I thought, we got a chance to go win a big one if we're willing to fight like this and clean up some stuff and willing to go after some more execution details and things. And so I really feel like our team can do that. And I'm excited for 48 minutes of just straight being locked in. And, as one of my citizens said, it's just a totally different feel. Every single play matters. And the game goes by so fast because you're locked in every single play. And it's important and it matters. And you lose track of the scoreboard and you lose track of the situation. And, I'm looking forward to that Friday night.
And it also always comes down to a handful of plays. And I said this week with the Whitmer game last week, 24-7 to me is not really indicative of how close that game was. I'm sure you watched it. There's probably 3 plays I can point to that make the difference in that game. And if they go differently, I'm not saying Whitmer for sure wins, but certainly not a 17-point margin of victory. And that's the difference between good teams and really good teams is sometimes it's just a handful of plays. And that's why you said every play matters on Friday. And it's cool to be in that moment, but it's also something that you have to embrace because if you're not ready for that, man, you can really certainly come out pretty tight and not ready to go.
Yeah, absolutely right. And yeah, you're right. The score was not indicative of how that game was played.
What do you think the keys are for Friday before I let you go?
Boring stuff. I mean, you said it. It has to be. You have to be ready to go. Not to get into the coach speed and be macho, but you have to be ready to go get in a fight. It's going to be incredibly physical. But I think our kids are ready for that. I really do. I think they're ready to. You're going to have to fight and scratch and claw for every single thing on every single play, and we've got to have that mentality. And again, it's fun. Like it's fun when you do that, and that's when you can reach the next step. But then, mistakes. Which team makes critical errors? Which team doesn't? We had a few penalties last week. Not a few. We had some penalties on critical downs, third downs and fourth downs, both offensively and defensively. They gave us a good chance on Saturday morning to get in the film room. And guys, if we do this next week, we're going home. And so, hopefully you're locked in, but not so tight that, you do those things again. But, we have to play no unforced errors on our part. There's always going to be a big play in special teams that happens somewhere that makes something break. And then, who's the team that makes the big plays? Who's the running back that breaks the tackle that gets away? Who's the quarterback that gets out of the pocket and makes a play that's an off schedule play? Who's the wide receiver that makes a catch when they're covered? I mean, it comes down to those things right there. You're not going to always be able to scheme everything. They're incredibly well coached. It's, sometimes it's you got to get to 1 versus 1, and your 1 has to win that matchup.
You said to me, I emailed you after the Whitmer-Perrysburg game, and you said, let's end the Cleveland domination. Let's have one of these Northwest Ohio teams win the region. And I'm hoping for you, man. I really would love to see you guys get there. And I've appreciated getting to know you more this year, and love talking with you, and appreciate all the support you've had for the show and the podcast this year. And I wish you the best of luck on Friday. I hope I can email you on Monday after a Jacket win.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it again next week.
All right. Thanks, Coach. That was Dirk Conner, the head football coach of the Perrysburg Yellow Jackets. Appreciate his time. And again, as he said, St. Ed's, no joke. Saw him last week. We will see. And that game being played at Elyria, again, all games 7 o'clock. Before we get to our next guest, want to say thank you, of course, to one of our other sponsors, and that is the folks over at Victory Auto Mall. Victory Auto Mall is your place to go if you're looking for a used car in Toledo, whether you're shopping for that first or your 10th truck. Make sure that you check them out. Their staff provides outstanding service in a no-pressure environment. Their only goal, to find you a great vehicle that matches your lifestyle and services you for years to come. Victory has an established exemplary reputation in the community, and they are a buy here, pay here dealership. Check them out online. WeFinanceCarsToday.com. You can also call them 419-345-3603, or you can check them out at 1632 West Lasky Road. So thank you to Victory Auto Mall. When you do go in, make sure you say or ask for Steve when you go in. So again, thanks to Steve and his staff over at Victory Auto Mall. And I'm happy to join our next guest, and that is the head football coach of the Napoleon Wildcats, and his team, you could say, maybe the Cinderella of this Northern Lakes League this year, and that's Tyler Swary. Tyler, thanks for joining us. Sad we couldn't have you the last time. I'm glad we can make it work this time. You just had to win a couple more weeks so we could finally get a chance to talk to you.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I was bummed I couldn't make it the other day.
Well, you look at the way that your team finished the regular season, and when we talked to you at the beginning of the year, you felt pretty good about where you're at, but I know injuries and just some weird things ended up happening with the group this year. And you come out of that regular season, things clearly not where you wanted them to end. You wanted to be in the conversation for that Cardinal division. You didn't quite get there. How do you take, much like we talked to you about last year, when you start out 0-4 and you have to come around and rebound to finish the season, how do you keep this group locked in? Is it a lot of the same stuff that you did last year when you didn't have a great start to the regular season?
Yeah, no, it was a lot of the process over outcome stuff. This offseason, we read the book Pound the Stone, and that was kind of our motto this year. And it's just keep grinding, keep doing the little things right, and the big picture. Things will eventually happen. And we win it. We had that stretch of, I think we lost 3 or 4 games there. Mm-hmm. And we weren't playing well. Obviously we had some guys injured. I don't think we were coaching the best that we could. And we had some tough conversations as a coaching staff, had some tough conversations with some of our players, and they responded. And, we went into that week 10 needing to win, and backs against the wall, and kids came out swinging, and we've been swinging ever since. So really proud of how they've handled themselves throughout the season, and kind of that truly up and down type season. And they're loving football right now. Practice this week has been the best I think that we've had all year, and things are clicking, and they're ready to go.
I look at this team, and what always impresses me about your group, and we've talked about this last year, we talked about it again this year, you have some kids, and I don't know if it's the mentality in the town or what, but just do not get fazed by a whole lot, in the sense that, yeah, again, like you said, 3 out of 4 you lose, but I'm going to guess that nobody in that locker room was sitting there pouting or crying or saying the season's done. You guys had to have conversations, I'm sure, tweak some things, do some different stuff. But that belief, I don't think ever goes away with this group, does it?
No, we've got guys that just want to play. They love to play, and we've got some gamers. We got a group of those baseball guys that went to the regional finals last year. And they had some struggles during their regular season last year, and then they turned it on in the postseason. So we got guys that just want to compete, and they don't really care who they're playing against, and with the seeds, we don't really care that we're a 13 seed. It doesn't really matter to us. We're going to go play you, and you give you everything we got.
It's funny you mentioned the seeds, because it's the same thing that I was talking about with Coach Conner about Lakewood St. Ed's is the 7 seed, but you play a bear of a schedule in a way. That's kind of you guys. You're a Division 4 team that is playing against teams that are bigger than you, bigger schools. More kids on the team in theory. And it's funny when you kind of start doing the, I guess, seeding versus, and we all probably check Fantastic 50 and all those other websites, but you guys are one of the higher rated teams in Division 4. But when you look at the record, people kind of get lost in 5-5. They weren't very good this year. And the reality is, a lot of teams in Division 4 that you're going up against now, if they played the schedule that you played, especially when you also consider the fact that you played a team that might win a Division 5 state title as well when all is said and done. Mm-hmm. You look at that schedule, there's a lot of teams that would have been 5-5 or worse that you're going to face in this state tournament run.
Yeah, no, and that's I think our last 2 opponents, I think their coaches knew that. It's tough to tell a 16, 17, 18-year-old, when they're looking at the film and they see that we're a 13 seed, they might not be taking us as serious, but, I know the coaches, gave us a lot of respect these last 2 weeks, because they knew our strength of schedule and kind of what we had. So, but yeah, no, it has gotten us prepared. We're clicking. And it's one of those things where I don't want to say the games have been easy, but it's felt easier in these last couple games than it has all year. So again, a lot of that has to do with guys are healthy. We've been practicing together for a couple of weeks here, and actually it's something we just talked about. A couple of the coaches were saying today. It was like week 7, and we were still like trying to teach kids positions because we had injuries somewhere and we had to move somebody here and there. And, it's really hard when you get that late in the season and you're teaching people new things. And today, we zip right through our offensive session, and it's like, because all these guys have been practicing, we're doing the same things for the last, 3 weeks now. So, things are clicking and they're gelling right at the right time.
I want to rewind to 2 weeks ago. You go again to the 4 seed, and it's not that you didn't go in expecting to win, but to win in the manner in which you did on the road, and to shut out a team that in theory is the higher rated, the better team. Were you surprised at all by the margin of victory, or were you guys able to spot some of that stuff going, man, I know we're pretty good, or we're better than where we're seated right now? Did you guys know that you were going to surprise some teams with how good you were going to be, or was it that you were even a little surprised at the margin of victory in that first game?
Well, I'm a big Drew Pasteur fan, and so it was like week 7 or 8, and it had all the different scenarios. And, obviously the one scenario had us at 13 going there. And, I remember just, talking to some of the coaches and saying that might be the perfect scenario for us, because this is a team that I think we could go beat and put us in a good position to, win it, 2 of them at least, so I was not expecting the way we beat them. Obviously, I expected us to win, but we played extremely well, and it was one of those games. I've been on the other side of it. Everything that could have gone wrong for them did. They had some kind of unforced fumbles and just some weird things that everything went our way, which I'll take that any day. But we played really well, And, it was one of those you're able to kind of breathe a little bit more, just, kind of saying, all right, we finally kind of put things together, and, we're okay. Because that Southview game, we played well in the second half. We did not start that game very, off to a good start there. So to play a full game, complete game, it was really, it was a good moment.
How difficult is it to prepare for some of these teams that you haven't seen? I know that you're only as good as the film is, and you're only as prepared as you can be, because, and everybody's in the same boat for the most part. Very rarely do you get to play teams that you've faced already, but is it a real challenge to be able to prep on such a short week, not really knowing or having seen a team and really knowing their ins and outs like you would if, again, you're playing like a Clay who you've seen several weeks, or you've got plenty of film, or you've talked to other coaches? Is it harder when you don't have teams from the area that you play?
Yeah, and I think too, it's tough when you're watching the teams play their opponents, and you're not really sure what their opponents are all
Yeah.
about. That was with the Clearview game. You're watching it, and you're kind of seeing them dominate, and it's like, okay, how good are these other teams that they're playing? Same with Bay. Their strength of schedule was actually pretty good. But you watch their last couple games, and they were really physical and pushed guys around. And it's like, okay, how good is this defense that they're playing against? And, so that was kind of that I think that's more difficult. And then I think our offense kind of does something similar to those teams too, when they don't know anything about us, and
Sure.
And really you look at a couple of our games, and some games we're running, Georgia's running the ball 30 times and with 4 touchdowns, and the next game Owen's throwing 5 touchdowns. So I think it's we can be kind of hard to game plan as well, because what are we going to do from week to week? That's,
sure.
Kind of deal with us.
Well, and you look at, and I'll just use like Central Catholic as an example locally, because they pretty much dust everybody that they play most years. And then, as you said, you kind of sit there and go, okay, how legit was that 56-point win? And you just don't know. But it's interesting, because I think you've hit upon something too, where even though your goal is never to go into the season and say, well, we're just going to be as diverse as possible just to throw teams off for week 12. Yeah. In a way, it worked out, because like you said, there's more than just one angle that you have to prepare for defensively against your offense.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and that's, and again, it throughout the year, George has been banged up a little bit, and there was some games, I think the Clay game, I think we had like 45 yards rushing, or he had 45 yards rushing. Yeah. I think we as a team had like 5 because we had a couple sacks or something. But,
yeah.
It's one of those where we want to be as balanced as possible, but, you take what the defense gives you, and if they're going to give us the run game, we're going to take all of it, but even if they don't, you still gotta try it. You got to plug in, try to plug it in a little bit just to open everything else up.
I asked Dirk the same question. I'll ask you, how invaluable is this time for some of those younger guys? You have a really senior laden group this year, a lot of guys who are going to move on, and some that are even going to play Division I college football next year. But you got this extra 3 weeks, and for your sake, hopefully 4, 5, and 6 extra weeks of practice. And you can get these young guys starting to understand what it takes to play at the varsity level, or what it takes to play for you, and what you expect out of this group. Is this just one of those where people don't understand how critical it is for next year, even though that's not your main focus, to have these extra few weeks of practice?
It's been huge. And I think, obviously with Dirk, in Perrysburg, they're at this level about, the last how many years, it's for us, we were excited 2 years ago just to have one more extra week of practice, and then last year we got 2 more weeks, and this year we're getting 3 at least, so I think that's the, you add those up after a while, and things will, really take into toll there. But, we've got our tight end is a junior. He did not start until week 10. We had to move our senior tight end to left tackle because we had our left tackle got mono and had the enlarged spleen and stuff, so he can't play. And so put our tight end down there, and our junior Quentin Maynard has started ever since and has played really well. But like, these extra weeks are huge for him because he's going to be our starter next year. And the same with our nose guard, Troy Barton is a junior. He didn't start until week 11, and and he's kind of won the position, and so these are huge for him. So we've got so we've got 16 seniors and we've got 18 juniors. So obviously a lot of those juniors haven't really been playing a ton. So some of them now have earned some roles, and it's been huge for them to get some of that practice time. So just huge. And then obviously for our scout team guys, some sophomores and things like that are on the scout team, they're still getting reps. They're still getting coached up, and so I think that will definitely pay dividends down the line.
Well, let's talk a little bit about this Friday. You guys have Sandusky, Perkins. Not as bad of a travel. I feel like of the three teams, you guys kind of lucked out because you don't have to go as far east. Not that you're not further west, but you at least have a little bit of a break. You get to go to Lake Community Stadium to take on Perkins. Give us a little bit of what you've seen from Perkins on tape and what stands out about them.
They're really good. Everything stands out,
Yeah.
They might be the most balanced team I've ever seen. I did some of their down and distance stuff earlier this week, and it's about even. They on first down, they throw half the time, they run half the time, and same thing for everything else. And they've got a really good running back, and they've got some really good receivers. They got a really good offensive line and a good quarterback. So there really is not a weakness, and then defensively, they're really big up front. They like to play a lot of man, and they're athletic, and they basically, say you're going to have to just beat us. You have to just beat us. So they kind of have that attitude with them, and so we have to go in there and be ready for a fight, and we have to be the one. We got to match their aggressiveness. That's kind of I think the only way that we can compete with them is if we go in there and we match how aggressive they are and take the fight to them.
When you look at a game like this, and I think it's universally true across all the games this week, but you really kind of start to get into this round where everybody's good from here on out. There isn't a week off per se. And I look at that transition that, as I was saying with Dirk, the really good teams make versus the good teams, where it's not necessarily about waiting for the other team to make a mistake, but as you just kind of highlighted, going and taking it and having an understanding that you've got to be as perfect as you possibly can be. And you mentioned slow starts and stuff like that, especially later in the season with some of the shifting and movement that you've had to do. Is it one of those where you're really stressing this week to the guys, yeah, we're kind of playing with house money a little bit because no one expected us to be here. But on the other hand, if we want to play into week 14, we've got to be able to understand that we have to start as best as we possibly can. We can't allow or spot a team like this points or opportunities early.
Yeah, no, and I agree with what Dirk had said earlier. Literally every play matters in games like this, and every possession matters. Against a team like this, if you give up a big score, and then you turn around and go 3 and out and punt it to them and give it to them, around the 50, you're in trouble. So we just got to make sure we stick together, because this will be the best offense that we see all year, or that we've seen. And so we know they're going to move the ball. They're going to score. We got to just keep them in front of us and make them fight for their points. And then offensively, we have to be able to move the ball a little bit. We don't have to score every possession, but we have to keep it out of their hands, chew up a little bit of clock, and shift the field a little bit in order to make sure that we stay in this game.
And maybe, I know you kind of talked about some of them, but is there any other key that you look at and you just feel like if we have to do this in order to win?
I think, obviously the turnover, we got to force one, and we can't give them an easy one. A lot of their games, and this happens when you have a really good defense. They're gifted turnovers a lot of times, and teams just hand them the ball. And so we have to make sure that we are taking care of the football, and and then on the flip side, we're going after it. And if we can get 2 takeaways, that'll keep us in the game.
Well, I appreciate the time. Again, I understand why you couldn't a couple of weeks ago, but glad we can make it work this time. And as I said, I love talking with you. I love watching you guys from afar, because when you won that first one, I kind of almost felt there's no way that they lose the second one. I kind of figured you guys were going to be here. And as I said, watching the story last year and then into this year, you guys have one of the most fun teams and toughest teams to watch in that sense, because I think sometimes you see those smaller teams and those smaller town teams, man, they just have something extra toughness wise. And you guys definitely have that in spades. So thanks for doing this. Best of luck to you. And again, I hope I can email you on Monday and congratulate you on a win after Friday night.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate you having me on.
That was Tyler Swary, the head football coach of the Napoleon Wildcats. His team takes on Sandusky Perkins. As I said to him, not the furthest travel of all the teams. He gets to at least go to Lake this week, but certainly should be an interesting matchup, the 1 seed versus the 13 seed. No one expected Napoleon to be here, so happy that they were able to do that. Before we get to our final guest, we have one more thank you that we have to give out, and that's to our friends over at Sideline Sports Eatery. If you're looking for a place to watch the big game, NFL, college football this weekend, or you're just looking for a place after or before the big game to eat, make sure you make Sidelines your place to go. Visit any one of their 7 convenient locations. They do such a fantastic job. We appreciate Eric Sitter and his team for everything that they do for us. Really appreciate them and all of the hard work that they do supporting high school athletics in the area. So thanks to Eric, thanks to Sidelines, and we do appreciate them for their support of the NLL Weekly podcast. And at this time, we'll bring in the last of the 3 that is still standing in the Northern Lakes League, and that is our good buddy Andy Brungard. And Andy, I kind of figured yeah, especially after this morning, people have to know Andy probably panicked this morning because he thought he left me high and dry last night. Luckily for him, the podcast wasn't till tonight, but I imagine that's kind of where you get to at this point in the season. You're trying to jumble everything and keep everything straight at this point.
Man, I was getting dressed this morning and I was like, feels good to be Thursday. I'm serious. I thought it was Thursday. I panicked. I told my wife I missed the radio show. Still Wednesday. I'm here.
Well, you get to go back in time, which not a lot of people get to do. So you at least have that going for you.
Hey, it was Back to the Future Day the other day.
That's right. It was. Yeah. Yesterday was the day.
That's right.
Let's go back through the last 2 weeks. Cleveland Rhodes, not to denigrate an opponent, but I think we kind of assumed that was going to be a win, or at least we're going to probably have a pretty good chance to move on.
Yep.
Last week was the one that was interesting to me because everybody and their brother would have told you that you guys are going to be playing the Clay Eagles last Friday. That ended up not being the case. You faced Sandusky. And in a way, I would say that might have been the matchup you didn't want to a degree, because now all of a sudden you've got a team coming to your place that knows that they aren't afraid of the higher seed. And even though Clay was the 6 and you guys are the 3, you still have to play a team that has a lot of confidence in their abilities after what they did the week prior. Was that a little bit of a different scenario than maybe what you thought you were going to go into, where you're saying, listen, guys, we cannot take this group lightly because of what they just did to a higher seeded team?
Yeah, and our kids did a great job buying into that. They had some really good athletes. I mean, their quarterback does a great job extending plays, scrambling. He's really tough to sack. They had a receiver that was probably the best receiver we had seen all year. And we just had to do a great job of keeping everybody in front of us. To be honest, we were kind of promoting at first we're going to play the Cardinal Division champs versus the Buckeye Division champs.
Yeah.
Be a championship showdown. Clay had a heck of a season. But if you evaluated Sandusky overall, they went 0-3 in the beginning of the year. They didn't have their quarterback. They were missing one of their offensive linemen early. They still only lost those games by about a touchdown. And then they went 7-1 after that. So I thought it was the perfect thing for us. We knew they were going to give us some gut punches and respond when they had to, and they did. And we were tied at 14 at one point. And I looked at our kids and I said, that's exactly what we want. We need a great reminder of the playoffs. Everybody's fighting to stay alive, and they gave us a great test.
And you bring up something I think that a lot of people don't realize, and I talked about this with Dirk about St. Ed's, and we were just talking with Tyler about it with his team, where people look at the seeds and they think that that's a direct indication of how good or bad a team is coming into those games. And what you realize is, and John Gallia said the same thing when we talked to him that first week of the playoffs. He said, this is not the same Sandusky team we played in week 1 of the regular season. And I think you're kind of echoing that sentiment where you have to be really careful just using the seeding as your baseline for how good or bad an opposing team is, because as you, I think, actually said a couple of weeks ago when we talked to you, you want to be playing your best football at this time of the year. And to Sandusky's credit, they were going into that game. And I'm sure you probably appreciated not having one of those games where it wasn't a cakewalk per se in the second round. And then you really come into this week where all of a sudden you've got to get those competitive juices going again.
Yeah. It's somebody asked me about this week for us and what do I think the difference is this year compared to last. And the biggest one is health.
Yeah.
I think no matter what team it is, if you can get to week 11 or week 12 and be healthy, that makes a big difference. And for Sandusky, they got healthy at the end of the year versus the beginning. And we're just fortunate, somebody reached out to me last week and said, how many starters do you have out? And we have none out right now. And Sandusky had that momentum of all their starters back. They had their best pieces in place, and kudos to them for finishing the season strong.
Let's be honest, Andy, you have not had a lot of luck, period, since you've been the head coach at Anthony Wayne with health, unfortunately. I would say quarterback's the one that always jumps out to me, but there's nothing like moving your tailback to quarterback week 3 and asking him to play that and reach in the regional final. But that's a different tale for a different day. I look at where you guys are at this point, and now you're going on the road. You get those neutral site things. You had the best answer, I thought, of everybody when we were talking about those 2 home games, and you said, how cool is it that we get to finish the regular season in the first 2 weeks, assuming we win, where we get the last 3 home games in a row, or we get 3 home games in a row, which you don't have a whole heck of a lot. But now you kind of start to go into that neutral site. I didn't ask the other 2 coaches this, but I'm always curious because this is kind of that odd thing that a lot of people don't recognize about the state playoffs when you're a head coach, because there's a lot of logistical stuff that goes into, you got to go look at the site and they show you your locker room and all that stuff. How do you guys prepare for a game like this? Do you just kind of take it like it's any road game, or do you treat it a little differently, knowing that it's kind of neutral site and it's a little bit different? Because at least with the road games, for the most part, you've been to those stadiums before. You know what to expect. Is it different, or is it kind of the same, or maybe both?
We went to Maumee yesterday and today to practice. And
shout
out to Cam Kuchar and those guys for letting us use the facility. It's awesome. And, it's interesting. Yesterday we showed up there and the kids were kind of goofy, and we had to take 10 minutes to lock it. They're just excited to be somewhere new.
Yeah.
You remember that they're kids, right? They're 16, 17 years old, and anything new is exciting. And it was good practice for us because today was a completely different attitude and demeanor. So we're going to go somewhere, nobody's on our team's been. I've not been there.
Yeah.
A couple of our assistant coaches went and watched Central and Medina Highland play a couple of years ago there. But other than that, it's a fresh place. So we try and get there about an hour early, other than just traveling somewhere new this week, just to let our kids walk the field, get acclimated, talk about it, get it out of their system, and then, get ourselves ready to go after that.
You mentioned Medina Highland. We'll talk about them here in a second, but this is one of those where the further you get into this thing, and sounds so basic and so no kidding kind of comment to say, but everybody gets better and better the further you go into this thing. And in a way, I think, not that you guys haven't been tested, because you have been, but you're really going to start to find out, assuming you keep going, which I certainly hope for your sake you do, but you're going to find out what this group's really made of, I think, over the next several weeks, and certainly this Friday.
Evan Brown talked to the team on Tuesday. Just a tremendous young man. Just somebody that we're really proud of that came out of our school and our football program. And he told our kids on Tuesday, guys, when we went on our playoff run, you don't know when it's going to happen, but adversity is going to hit.
Yep.
When it does, you got to take a deep breath, gather yourself on how you're going to respond, and then respond quickly and with some fortitude. So it's been a great message for our kids that we've talked about this week. You never know when adversity is going to hit, but it's going to hit in the playoffs, because at the end of the state ranking, Medina Highland was ranked 4th. We were ranked 4th. We were tied in the state ranking at 4th. They finished 2nd in the region. We finished 3rd. Somebody told me yesterday there's only 2 games where both teams are undefeated that are playing this week, and we're one. So
one of them, yeah.
It's reached a point where there's going to be tough teams. There's going to be adversity, and your team's got to find ways to rally and respond when it happens.
When I do the Whitmer games, I always kind of write a little bit of I try and get a little poetic, but I write a little open with it. And to start the Whitmer one, I talked about there's a episode, Urban Meyer, when he started at Ohio State, they did like a Hard Knocks kind of thing with their preseason camp, and he talked about being special and how you get pushed, and sometimes you find a little bit of special inside. And Justin Keller does the games with me, said the team that's the most special at handling adversity is the one that's going to end up making the deepest run. And I think you'd probably agree that you have to be able to figure out and not panic in those moments, because if you do, you're going to find yourself going home. It is so critical to keep a level head. And that's always easier said than done, as you said, with 15, 16, and 17-year-old kids.
You know, everybody loves the quote, everybody's got a game plan until they get punched in the face. And it's just that it's just that adage that as soon as adversity hits, because it's going to hit you in the face, you don't know what that adversity is going to be, but how do you respond when those things happen? So our kids have done a great job. It's like a blessing and a curse with these guys. They don't back down from anybody. They want to punch people in the face, and they've been hit in the face a few times. If we can keep our composure, Medina Highland's going to have big plays. They're averaging 44 points a game. Medina Highland's going to get some stops. It happens, but we need to match that, and I think our kids should rise to that occasion on Friday.
Now, you have a unique situation, unlike, well, I guess Perrysburg had the same thing, but you get to see a team that's local that you at least have some familiarity with, that Highland played last Friday when playing St. Francis. And not that you guys played St. Francis, but I'm sure you're familiar enough, having played them in the past and having been able to watch them from afar this season. Does that help, having a team that you're at least somewhat familiar with, to kind of scout against and say, all right, and I don't know, you guys may have even, for some reason, it feels like you guys may have scrimmaged St. Francis. I could be wrong on that. But like when you have a situation like that, where you can kind of say like, all right, we know how we feel like we stack up against St. Francis. So here's maybe based off of how they attacked Highland, we maybe tweak it based off of that and how we match up. You know,
Josh Linke and Chad Long, St. Francis and Fremont Ross, I got to talk to them both, and they both gave some great insight on their thoughts on playing Medina Highland. And then you evaluate the schemes that they run and what can work for you. It's not that you're going to do the exact same thing,
sure,
but you can see the matchups in the areas that help you out. So, you know, you see the touchdown that Fremont Ross scores, or the 2 touchdowns that St. Francis scores, and how they defend them. And you definitely take things from their bags that they use and put them into your own. And, you know, the biggest thing for me is when you trade film, you get 3 games. So when you ask for those 3 games, you're constantly looking on YouTube or whatever you can find out who lines up like our offense and who plays our defense, to help give yourself a little bit of an advantage there.
Yeah, it's interesting because they also, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that the opposing team gets to pick which 3 games they send. Is that correct?
Correct. That's correct.
Yeah. So you can send, literally, if you want to, the games where you were dominant and starters didn't even play in the second half. I mean, it really doesn't make a difference. And so that's one of those challenges, as you said, where you have a very small picture of what that team is versus the full scope at that point. I look at this Highland team too last week, and they did give up some points to St. Francis. And I imagine, not that you think every game's going to go exactly the same, but you do look at that game probably a little bit and say, well, they did give up 20. And I think we probably should be able to, again, you don't assume 20, but that you should be able to move the ball a little bit. That at least probably gives you a little bit of a starting point to say, we know that it's possible to move the ball and score against these guys.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely think that offensively, but, you know, if you evaluate Medina Highland last year when we played them, we had 0 stops on offense. Fremont Ross had 0 stops when Fremont Ross was on defense. And I think St. Francis had 1 stop when they were on defense. So I know you look at it and you're like, we can move the ball and score points, but nobody wants, you know, a playoff game to be a boat race where it's fireworks every time he gets the ball. We've got to get stops. We've got to find a way to formulate stops on 3rd and 4th down and force them to punt.
I did your game against them. I think it was in 22. You guys played them there in the first round. And that was the same thing, where first half, you guys really hung in and I thought challenged them. And then that third quarter just got away from you a little bit. And that really was the main difference. This is, again, I imagine a situation where you're saying it's got to be a full 48 minutes. We cannot take a playoff and assume that we're going to be able to get away with it. And not that anybody does that intentionally, but there are times where maybe you don't go as hard as you should. This is one of those where you got to be perfect every play.
You know, what's interesting, Medina Highland, the last 2 times we played them, had a real mobile quarterback. And when you get into the playoffs, mobile quarterbacks can give you trouble.
Yeah.
I think this is the first time we feel like we have the mobile quarterback. Talking to Grant traveled to Medina Highland as a freshman. He played sparingly in that game. I mean, a little bit. He got in a kick return, some at receiver, actually. Last year, he only got to play a half. He came out in the second half. And last year, they drove down to the red zone and scored twice. We drove down to the red zone twice and got 1 field goal. So we feel like if we can give Grant 4 quarters, extend this game into the fourth quarter this year, and hopefully score in the red zone this time around, this game should play out differently.
What in particular, I know we've kind of touched upon it already. Is there one thing or a couple of things in particular that just jump out at you about them on film?
Anytime you have, we played a game on Monday that was called Guess the Offensive Line. So I took Whitmer's offensive line, Finley's offensive line, Perrysburg, Hilliard Darby's, and Medina Highlands, and I made a list of height and weight and their averages, and I told our kids, guess which offensive line you think is which. And, because you turn on film and they look big. And they like to establish the ground game. I think they threw maybe 4 passes against us last year. And they like to control the line of scrimmage. They've got big guys to do it. But I think what's in our favor, what gives us advantage, they jump out on film with their size, but they're not as big as Whitmer. They're not as big as Finley. They're not as big as Hilliard Darby. They're a little bit bigger than Perrysburg. But, and that's what jumps out on you on film. So it really helps in our league to play those other teams that challenge you up front so that our kids have learned how to handle those situations.
Before we let you go, some keys that you think are really important. I know we touched on some of them, but what are some of the things that you really feel like in order to be successful on Friday and make it to a regional final, we have to do these things?
We have to be healthy. We got to have everybody in the game on Friday. It's such a big thing in the playoffs. People don't realize is your health. Your starters are there. Having Grant for 4 quarters, having Braden Gardner for 4 quarters, our offensive linemen, everybody. So we got to stay healthy. As funny as that sounds, it's not a popular answer, but you got to have that this week. The other thing is, controlling turnovers. And the big one I think that gets looked over a lot is winning 3rd and 4th down. We get into these big games, 3rd and 4th down are huge. It's win or go home. I love going for it on 4th down, but on defense, we also get stops on 4th down. So those, when you go back and look at them at the end of the day, you talk about you got to steal 4 or 5 plays here or there. Usually you want those plays to be on 3rd or 4th down at this point in the season.
And it always comes down to, that's the thing I keep saying, is it always just comes down to a handful of plays. And even in the blowouts, sometimes, maybe it's snowballed from one particular spot, but it's always just a handful of plays that usually make a difference in these big games.
I mean, absolutely. Let's go back to when we played Whitmer. We converted so many 3rd and 5s, 3rd and 6s that just kept us going and kept the clock in our favor. If we don't get those, it's a different game.
Yeah.
That really comes to light when it's week 13 and that clock's ticking pretty fast.
Well, as always, appreciate you. I know that you thought you missed it, but I knew you wouldn't miss it intentionally by any stretch. So I do appreciate you. And again, I've told you this multiple times. Love talking with you. Good luck to you guys on Friday. Hope I can email you on Monday and congratulate you on our win. It's been fun talking to you this year, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks, Chris. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Andy. That was Andy Brungard, the head football coach of the Anthony Wayne Generals. His team taking on Medina Highland at Bellevue on Friday night at 7 o'clock. Those are our 3 teams that are still alive, so make sure, again, you follow. St. Ed's versus Perrysburg at Elyria, that game at 7. Then Napoleon versus Sandusky Perkins at Lake, if you're going to that. And Anthony Wayne, as we just talked to with Dirk Conner, they're playing Medina Highland at Bellevue on Friday. So all of our teams, and I know that I said this will be the last for fall sports. I've said this to Dan on multiple occasions, and I'm going to say it one more time because it bears repeating. Every one of these coaches, doesn't matter who it was, when it was, regardless of how their season was or wasn't going, every guy in this league said yes to an interview on this podcast. And when the coaching staffs of these respective schools buy in to what we're trying to do and highlight this league in Northwest Ohio, and it is the biggest league and it is the one that has the most attention, but when these guys buy in and they join us and give us time every week, it means the absolute world to me. And I know it does to Dan as well. And every guy who is a coach, thank you. All the way from Greg Silm and LaCharles at Northview and Springfield. Andy and Dirk have joined multiple times. Tyler's now joined multiple times. Ken Winters, the same thing. Guys all through. Chad Long's been great. John Gallius, everybody. And I certainly don't want to leave anybody out, but everybody has been fantastic to talk to this year. So honestly, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for joining us each and every week on Wednesday. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you for listening. And this has been a great first season of this in the podcast form. So thanks to that. I also have to give a special thank you to Justin Keller, who has done a ton of these. He joked he was our Alec Baldwin. If you know the Saturday Night Live lore, anytime that Lorne Michaels didn't have a host, he would always call Alec Baldwin, Justin said, just so he had somebody to host because he knew Alec wasn't doing anything. And to be fair, Justin Keller became our Alec Baldwin a little bit, but he is so intelligent. He knows the game so well. He prepares so much. And Justin Keller has been a rock star in the radio booth with us this year. He's also been a rock star on this podcast. And then also want to thank the sponsors once again, Victory Auto Mall, Car Stereo One, Sidelines. They've all been fantastic this season as well. And also want to say thank you, a guy that doesn't get mentioned a whole lot in this podcast, Randy Hauser, who is the Director of Football Operations for Whitmer. He's also the guy who helped us sponsor this podcast, and he's helped us with advertising over the years. So thank you to Randy. We are so excited. As I said, we're going to take a little bit of a break. We're going to be off until after Thanksgiving, and then early December, we're going to come back with basketball and start talking with the winter sports coaches here in the Northern Lakes League. Excited to talk with them, excited to get the next round of sports going. Certainly, hopefully the guys that joined us tonight, and Dirk and Tyler and Andy, they're still playing for a long time, but really excited to start talking about basketball and hockey and some of the other winter sports in the Northern Lakes League. So look for that. Stay tuned on X. CSchmid01 is my Twitter handle. Look for it there. We'll also tweet it out. Richard Brown at the Northern Lakes League, his is NLL Sports on X as well. I'm sure that that'll be advertised there as well. So make sure you be on the lookout for the next podcast, but take a couple weeks off. We will see you after Thanksgiving. As always, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you in the winter sports season. Everybody have a great holiday, and we will see you in early December. Bye-bye, everybody.